Welcome everybody. My name is Simon FUNGE-SMITH. I work for FAO in the Regional Office for Asia Pacific in Bangkok. And welcome to this session on the Illuminating Hidden Harvests, the contribution of small-scale fisheries to sustainable development in the Asia Pacific region. So we're very excited to be presenting this first look at some key results from the Illuminating Hidden Harvest, or IHH initiative, for the Asian region and also Oceania. The IHH initiative is a global initiative of FAO, Duke University and WorldFish with associated partners to generate and disseminate new evidence about the benefits, interactions and impacts of small-scale fisheries to inform policy and practice. IHH is intended to inform all levels of policy-making processes and contributes to empowering fishery communities, their organizations and advocates to make a strong case for productive, sustainable and equitable small-scale fisheries. In this way, the IHH initiative supports also the implementation of the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication, and progress towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The IHH has been going now for 4 years, and we're now close to finalizing this, so it's timely and important to have this contribution to the celebrations to the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture 2022. A key output of the IHH initiative will be a major report later this year, which provides an insight into the diverse contributions of small-scale fisheries around the world. So for this session today, we have a number of presentations on the IHH, followed by a Q&A session, which will be answered by our panel here today, but also supported by an IHH core team who are meeting in Italy right now and will be joining in the same room as Mar, one of our panelists. So make sure that you put down your questions and comments, because we will run through these presentations and we'll take the Q&A session at the end. Please make a note of those or put them in the Q&A box, and we will pick these up and try and answer them either in live or we'll actually type answers for you. So as we're waiting for a few more people to join us, I'm going to put you over now onto a small introductory video on the IHH initiative. And that's about 5 minutes, and then we'll get into the presentations. So if I can now get this up. Yeah, just can everyone see my video screen now? Mark, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, here we go.
But the screen is still white. Okay, yeah.
The contribution of small-scale fishery to sustainable development are often undervalued.
This results in missed opportunities to progress the Sustainable Development Goals.
In the worst instances, small-scale fisher and fish workers experiencing increased marginalization
And exclusion from governance, spaces, and resources.
The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, or FAO, Duke University and WorldFish team up in 2017 to help address this issue.
By launching the Illuminating Hidden Harvests global initiative, this initiative will help to further improve methods and capacities to collect, analyze, and use data in support of small-scale fisheries.
As the basis for sound and inclusive policymaking and resource governance.
and the importance of identity in understanding fishers and fish workers' choices.
Thanks to the contribution of more than 800 experts.
New and clear insights are coming to the surface.
Adding to the growing body of evidence on small-scale fisheries.
We will continue to develop new methods and capacities for better data collection in the future.
Governments, researchers, and others can apply and refine.
Critically, the Illuminating Hidden Harvests knowledge to support the implementation of the small-scale fisheries guidelines.
By providing key information to organizations and artists.
Make a strong case for productive, sustainable, and equitable small-scale fisheries for all.
Okay, thank you. All right, there you go. That was just a snapshot of the Hidden Harvest Initiative, and you've got a quick look at a lot of the players that have been involved in the development of this study. It was a huge effort, a huge global effort, and so it was a really great opportunity to get everyone, or get as many people as we could to contribute a little soundbite there. I understand we had a few sound issues. I apologize for that, but hopefully you could read the subtitles. Now I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, and that is Maria del Mar MANCHA-CICNEROS, and she's going to provide us with the background to the IHH study purpose and approach. Mar completed her postdoctoral position at Duke University in the US, where she worked as the technical lead for the Illuminating Hidden Harvest study, and was leading the building of the data set and collation of all of this information that underpins the IHH. So she's very well placed to talk to this theme of the background of the IHH. Mar is now the Sustainable Seafood Program Manager at Scripps Institute of Oceanography, University of California, San Diego. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Mar. Please, can we have your presentation on the IHH study?
Thank you, Simon. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my
Yes.
intro slide? Great. So hello, everyone. Thank you, Simon. And yes, like you said, I will be giving an overview of the approach taken by the Illuminating Hidden Harvest study, or as we call it for short, the IHH study. So, to start out, recognizing small-scale fisheries as complex socio-ecological systems, IHH really took a multidisciplinary approach, which is closely embedded within the Sustainable Development Goals framework, as we can see from the figure, as well as the voluntary guidelines for secure and sustainable small-scale fisheries, and particularly as a response to the call for better data within the small-scale fisheries guidelines. IHH looks at the contributions of small-scale fisheries to the three pillars of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental, and also with the strong focus on nutrition and governance. And additionally, with gender as a cross-cutting dimension throughout. The main data source for the study was a series of 58 country and territory case studies that were carried out in the countries that you see in the map highlighted here, which were selected according to a series of indicators and accounted for 68% of the global marine catch and 62% of the inland catch, according to FAO data. The country and territory case studies were carried out by national research institutes, fisheries organizations, local and international fisheries experts, for a total of more than 800 contributors, with the objective to compile available data and information on small-scale fisheries at country level. so including official statistics, surveys, expert knowledge, etc., and following a standard protocol provided by the IHH team. Gender focal points were also identified within the countries and territories that we worked with to support these case studies and the experts on the data collection to flush out all available data and knowledge on gender and small-scale fisheries, including gender disaggregated data, to estimate the contributions by women and men in small-scale fisheries, for example, in terms of fisheries labor, and highlighting specific gaps and limitations of the available data. Other data sources that we're used to complement and fill gaps and triangulate these country case study data were responses to an ad hoc questionnaire on small-scale fisheries that was sent to FAO member countries and territories, for which we received about 104 responses as well. Existing global and regional databases were also used, literature reviews, labor force surveys, and household income and expenditure surveys, for example. And these were primarily used to finally, specific thematic studies were also carried out in order to highlight key aspects of the small-scale fisheries, themes that cannot be quantified at a global level. So, for example, a study on indigenous peoples and identity. And as we all know, there is no internationally agreed definition of small-scale fisheries. So the IHH study did not prescribe one for it. Instead, these country case study experts that we were instructed to use the most commonly used definition for small-scale fisheries in their country for data compilation. However, the IHH study did use a tool called the Characterization Matrix that allowed us to score each fishery included in the study according to a series of characteristics such as gear use, motorization, distance from shore, etc., to place them along a continuum between small-scale and large-scale fisheries, and give a better sense of what we are really looking at when we talk about small-scale fisheries in the study. Finally, the data compiled through the different approaches were analyzed and extrapolated to produce global estimates of key indicators, such as catch and employment, but also used to gain better insights on issues that are very important for small-scale fisheries at different spatial scales, such as the national or subnational level, in addition to those aspects highlighted in the thematic studies that cannot be quantified at a global level, yet recognizing the high diversity of small-scale fisheries. We also had a technical advisory group who advised on the design, analysis, and interpretation of the IHH work all throughout the process of the study. And as mentioned earlier, IHH took a multidisciplinary approach that's illustrated by this diagram and put a stress on the interconnections among the different dimensions and related questions in order to draw a more holistic picture of small-scale fisheries and highlight their overall contributions, benefits, and impacts, as well as looking at the data through the lens of different disciplines at the same time. So starting to address key questions such as how much fish comes from small-scale fisheries, how many people depend on small-scale fisheries for their livelihoods, how do women contribute to and benefit from small-scale fisheries, how important is small-scale fisheries catch for nutrition, and how are small-scale fisheries governed. So just to give you a snapshot of the results that we found for the Asia Pacific region, in terms of the small-scale fisheries catch, we found that 23 million tons of small-scale fisheries catch originates in Asia out of 37 million globally, and 0.41 million tons comes from Oceania. In terms of employment, the number of people at least partially dependent on small-scale fisheries in Asia amounts to 46 million, and for Oceania, that is 50,000 people. In terms of we found that substantial labor contributions by women to small-scale fisheries, 36.9 of these million people are in Asia and 0.68 million in Oceania. We found that fish from small-scale fisheries have the potential to make considerable contributions to nutrition, and in Asia, that looks like 20% of the recommended nutrient intake for calcium, selenium, zinc, and omega-3 fatty acids goes for 271 million women in Asia. And finally, we found that 25% of small-scale fisheries are formally under co-management in Asia, while 89% in Oceania. And with that, I will leave it there and give time for our next speakers, who will go more into detail in some of the aspects of the IHH approach and the findings relevant for the Asia Pacific region. So over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Ma. Can you unshare your screen? Great. Thanks a lot for that. That's a quick intro to the scope and the breadth of IHH. And so now we have the next presentation from Ilham on the experiences from preparing IHH country case studies Indonesia. Ilham, it was the lead for the IHH country case study for Indonesia. So he knows the challenges for bringing together a diverse SSF data set for a country. Ilham was recently appointed as the Director of Marine and Fisheries Polytechnic of Jembrana in Bali, Indonesia, in addition to his role as Associate Professor in that education institution. So with more than 20 years of experience in teaching, research, international collaboration, his expertise is within the field of sustainable development and fisheries. Ilham, the floor is yours, please, for your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Simon. I will be sharing my screen. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to share the Indonesian experience in the preparation of the Illuminating Hidden Harvest. And as highlighted by Simon, then I was the leader of the Illuminating Hidden Harvest project in Indonesia. Okay, let me first explain a bit about the Indonesian fisheries. Based on the data recently released by FAO, it is clear that Indonesia is the second largest fish producer in the world. We keep being the top 10 fish destinations in the world. Indonesian wild capture fishery productions was about 7.7 million tons. In addition to that, fish production came from aquaculture was about 5.5 million tons. And based on the data from 2019, the fish consumption rate in Indonesia was about 50.65 kilogram per year per capita. And it is clear that in Indonesia, the majority of fisheries are small scale. So with the area of 18,000 islands and comprising the 6th largest exclusive economic zone in the world, it's clear that almost half of Indonesian people are living near the coast. There was no clear definition of the small-scale fisheries according to the Indonesian law, but however, it does appear that the law acknowledges small-scale fishers are those whose activities aiming to earn livelihood in fishing without using fishing vessels or using fishing vessels measuring under 10 gross tonnage. Based on the recent data, it was also clear that more than 500,000 of the fishing fleets were exist in Indonesia. It means it was about 96% of the total fishing fleets were recorded as small-scale fishers. However, it is likely that inactive fishing fleets were also included in the published data by the government. But then when we look into detail, that it's clear that small-scale fishers or small-scale fisheries still contributed around 70 to 85% of the employment in captive fisheries in Indonesia. One interesting thing about the SSF Indonesia is that the small-scale fishers are not subject to business licenses. They are free from taxes and are free to catch the fish in all fisheries management areas in Indonesia. So, based on this condition, it appears that the exemption of small-scale fishers from business license and tax might lead small-scale fisheries to be data poor. And unreported landings by small-scale fishers coupled with limited attention to small-scale fisheries has been very common in Indonesia. in the context of SSF management. I think according to the latest situation that inadequate data collection system is still seen as a major issue in the management of small-scale fisheries. Therefore, all these circumstances can be the ones to blame for underestimation of catches, which in turn will affect or will cause uncertainty in small-scale fisheries in Indonesia. These are the fisheries management areas in Indonesia. There are 11 from Sumatra to Papua. And based on this figure, it's clear that it's not an easy thing to manage such a huge marine area like what we have in Indonesia. So it is clear that in order to improve the management of marine and fisheries in Indonesia, especially when we are dealing about the small-scale fisheries, we need to promote improved data collection system and monitoring programs. And when we had this Illuminating Hidden Harvests project in Indonesia, we believe that we can contribute at least to macro level contribution for SSF in terms of the environmental, social, economic, and governance dimensions. And with the study, we, at the end of the day, expect that the involvement of SSF or the representatives will be higher in terms of the fisheries management plan and policy processes in Indonesia. When we were dealing with the methodology of the Illuminating Hidden Harvests Indonesia, it was a great opportunity to work with international experts like those from FAO, from Duke University, and very nice that we work with the provided templates. However, in the study, we did utilize all the data and information available from published and unpublished data. We had official stats from Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. We have data from the Statistics Indonesia. We also have data from Fishing Port Information Center, which was initiated since 2013 by the Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries. Also, we utilized all our information from reports, scientific papers, unpublished theses. And we also conducted field survey to calibrate our data and findings from those reports and publications. So we indeed went to places which were major landing sites for small-scale fisheries in North Sumatra, in Central Java, East Java, North Sulawesi, Bali, and Papua. And when we were doing the analysis, we used the data from Fishing Port Information Center as the basis for the calculation and extrapolation, also for the backcasting for the 6-year period from 2018 to 2013. And cross-validation among any valid data was made in order to scientifically ensure that correct as related estimate was made. Some key findings I would like to say here. First one, in terms of the environmental characteristic. For example, based on the amount of fish catches, if we have to categorize them into LSF and large-scale fishery and small-scale fisheries, in Indonesia, based on our study, we found out that almost 2 million tons for the catch coming from the SSF. For example, in 2013, we have 1.7 million ton of fish, and then in 2018, we got about 1.4 million tons from the small-scale fisheries. In terms of the number of species, it was clear that most or the majority of the species coming from the demersal ecosystem type. And when we combine the data with the inland fisheries, we found out that majority of the catches coming from the marine fisheries compared to that from the inland fisheries. In addition to that, based on the ecosystem type, most of the SSF catch were from a small pelagic, And in terms of the fisheries management areas, out of 10 FMAs in Indonesia, we found out that highest or significant amount of catch coming from the fisheries management areas, number 716, and then 573, and also 572, Indian Ocean and North Sulawesi waters. In terms of the social dimension, we could highlight here that, for example, the higher number of households came from marine fisheries, which has 2 times higher than inland fisheries, as it can be seen in this figure. It might be due to Indonesia's marine potential throughout the territory of Indonesia, provides a lot of opportunity for fishermen to take advantage of the marine product. So here we can see the figure. And one of the interesting findings is that in 2018, the fish consumption rate is about 54.5, and in 2019 is like 59 point something kilogram per capita per year. In terms of the economic, it is clear that both male and female play a significant role in SSF. And the difference is that when we look at the number of workers in the post-production stage, where female were the highest number when we talking about the, for example, the post-production activities like drying, salting, smoking, freezing, cleaning, and retailing. But in terms in the production process, male was playing the major significant role. Last but not least, in terms of the general finding of the government characteristics, it is clear that Indonesian Constitution and several laws and regulations acknowledge, respect, and protect the rights of traditional communities, including customary maritime rights. However, community organizations, NGOs, and government on the ground keep initiating efforts to protect these rights. And very recently, the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries of Indonesia are focusing on the development of small-scale fisheries through what we call Kampung Perikanan Maju, or something like villages specialized for increasing fishes and aquaculture welfare. This is my last slide, highlighting the snapshot of the what we call, I think, one of the critics and insight we got from this Illuminating Hidden Harvests study. For example, based on the official and formal data released by the government, the captive fisheries production was about 7.7 million tons. In addition to the aquaculture production, 5.5 million tons. In total, we got around 13.2 million tons of fish produced in Indonesia. If we have to calibrate this with the Indonesian fish consumption per capita per year in 2019, it means we already consume around 13.5 million tons of fish, which is, this is an interesting question, whether is there any underestimation in terms of the data of fish catches, or what is actually the amount of unreported fishing in Indonesia. And we believe that this kind of study through the Illuminating Hidden Harvests can provide us new or updated insights. I think that's all, Simon. I try to manage my time as well as possible, 12 minutes. Sorry for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilham. Not bad at all. Well done. And thanks for those insights on Indonesia's SSF. I'm sure it was a huge challenge. It's such an enormous country, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, during the Q&A. Right, now we are going to hear from Michael FABINYI on the social dimension of small-scale fisheries. How can IHH support securing sustainable small-scale fisheries? Mike is a member of the IHH Technical Advisory Group, which provided oversight and advice to the IHH team over the 4 years of the IHH initiative and helped develop the research questions and review of our analysis. Mike is an associate professor at the University of Technology, Sydney, where his work has been geographically concentrated in the Asia Pacific, covering core research interests such as coastal livelihoods, fisheries trade, and the role of China in global fisheries. Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you to the IHH team for inviting me to present today based on my work as a member of the technical advisory group. So, just clicking through, sorry. The PowerPoint seems to be frozen, sorry. Hopefully it'll take, I might just try stopping sharing and resharing. And okay, sorry about that. Had our fair share of technical challenges this conference, I think it's fair to say. Sorry about that. So obviously, small-scale fisheries, are hugely significant. That has been sort of amply demonstrated in the IHH findings so far, and obviously of huge social significance. Okay, so as one simple example, one of the big headline numbers, small-scale fisheries account for 94% of the estimated 120 million people employed in capture fisheries or involved in subsistence fishing. However, small-scale fisheries make a range of sort of more specific social contributions beyond direct employment alone. So, for example, we can see how small-scale fisheries are particularly important in low-income areas. So, in least developed countries, one of the sort of the eye-catching figures I thought was that 83% of total capture production of small-scale fisheries are in least developed countries, and so make specific contributions in areas that are marginalised. Roughly 40% of those involved in small-scale fisheries, supply chains, or subsistence activities are women. So often, and this is a sort of been talked about a lot at this conference, but often the contributions of women to small-scale fisheries aren't as easily obvious in that often their role in the division of labour of small-scale fisheries often tends to be more in the subsistence and post-harvest segments. I'm sorry, that should read. And so, but thinking along from a value chain perspective, it's about 40% are women. Small-scale fisheries have particularly important roles in food and nutritional security for developing children in particular. And so Ma mentioned before some of the distinctive contributions and the extent of those contributions to certain groups, for example. I thought one of the interesting and noteworthy aspects of the IHH study was its attention to not only assessing the some of the big numbers, so to speak, of small-scale fisheries, but attention to some of the aspects of small-scale fisheries that are very difficult to or impossible to quantify. These sorts of issues, as we know, are highly significant in different ways, and so I think it's fair to say the extent to which the potential contributions of small-scale fisheries are realised, or the extent to which small-scale fisheries ultimately impact upon and improve the lives of the people who are involved with them, are highly influenced by some of these sorts of social issues, social practices, and social factors. So some of the thematic studies in the IHH study, highlighted, for example, the roles of indigenous or traditional ecological knowledge, the ways in which small-scale fisheries serve as a source of tradition, some of the ways in which it intersects with ethnic identity in many cases, and also some of the challenges of small-scale fisheries in various parts of the world. So linking to governance and the ways in which, you know, the contributions of small-scale fisheries can be made more explicit or through governance. There's many examples or many cases, sorry, where I think it's clear that the global community can do better to improve the sorts of social outcomes that small-scale fisheries can potentially provide through better governance. So, for example, one of the findings of the IHH study was that only roughly 40% of the small-scale fisheries global catch is taken in fisheries that formally require or allow for co-managed fisheries. And out of these fisheries, participation is considered to be high in only about 20% of them. So there are clear needs to improve governance representation of small-scale fisheries in various governance forums, from the local scale of the fishery itself to higher levels of governance. There's also clear needs to improve representation, for example, of women in the governance of small-scale fisheries. And we've had a lot of discussion over the last couple of days at this conference about these challenges, and the small-scale fisheries guidelines, or the voluntary guidelines for securing small-scale fisheries, provide one pathway and commitment to move forward with some of these very large-scale challenges. So I want to touch a little bit more on one particular governance challenge that sort of cross-cuts the whole study. And so that's the value of and the need for increased social and economic monitoring in small-scale fisheries. So moving from monitoring fisheries only in terms of catch or target species, volume and value and so on, to thinking about some of the specific social contributions of small-scale fisheries. And so the basic idea that once you have a better idea of how small-scale fisheries contribute to economies and societies, once those contributions are made more explicit and visible, there's more of an incentive to govern them in ways that maintain or increase those contributions. There are a couple of obvious, or several challenges, obviously, in doing this. So one, a potential pathway forward is to try and integrate the monitoring of some of the specific social contributions made by small-scale fisheries into standard fisheries monitoring systems. So, for example, data on employment, incomes, demographics, and so on. And sometimes this doesn't need to necessarily involve new data collection and so on, but it can be a case of better integration of fisheries data with other data sets, for example, health data or labour force data, census surveys, some of the sorts of routine government data collection that may be done at more local levels, not necessarily at national census levels, and so on. And my colleague Nick McLean is working on a project such as this in Indonesia, trying to go through the range of Indonesian fisheries or Indonesian data collection and statistical systems to basically try and see which sorts of statistics might be useful for ultimately to feed into the industrial tuna harvest strategy. And so trying to understand what are the sorts of social and economic monitoring that is going on in other contexts that can potentially feed into the understanding of the fishery. It's not always a matter of collecting or of integrating more data. It's also given that we know that ongoing government capacity constraints will continue, and so given also that we know that many of the important aspects about small-scale fisheries aren't always particularly easily amenable to monitoring, and so I think a key challenge is to see if we can think of more innovative ways of monitoring that can contribute to social outcomes. So, for example, my colleague Kate Barclay has worked extensively with the social wellbeing framework. Our Congress host here, Ratana Trinpagji, has recently published a nice paper looking at the different conceptualizations of vulnerability in small-scale fisheries. And I think these sorts of frameworks offer useful sorts of meeting points between some of the less quantifiable aspects of small-scale fisheries and some of the more conventional indicators for small-scale fisheries. And so I think if we can get creative about some of our social and economic monitoring systems in ways that are systematic, yet also try and capture some of the complexities of the social processes going on, that may be one potential pathway forward. And with that, I'll finish up there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so we've had these snapshots and insights into the IHH study, and it's now time to move into a Q&A session or a comments session. We have, as I mentioned, a large number of the core team from IHH are in the call as well, or in the meeting as well. They're sitting with Mar in Italy. And so first of all, I'd just like to put or give the opportunity to anyone in the audience if they want to put their hand up or put a question into the Q&A box. But if nothing's forthcoming, then I'm going to, I've got a few questions of my own, but I also would like to perhaps give the chance to the core group to maybe talk to a few of the challenges that we faced. So if there's something from the audience, I'd welcome you to put it in the Q&A box, or if you could do that. But in the meantime, first of all, I'd like to put this question to the core group, and it's something along the lines of, a lot of what we do when we try to make Hidden Harvest work is to get the data and then hope that that data will be used, or it's been very tricky to get hold of this data. And Mike has just been talking about how we can leverage data from other mechanisms, other data collection processes and other institutions. I wanted to put this out to the colleagues. What other sort of forms of data can we or should we be using? We used employment survey stuff very effectively this time. Is there any other big data that we might be able to tap into? What are your thoughts on that? I'll ask Mike later, but maybe I'll put that to the core team first if there's anyone who wants to answer it, and then I'll take it to Mike.
Thank you, Simon. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can. Just to introduce you, this is Javier Basoto from Duke. He's one of our core team.
Yeah, so thank you. Yes, I'm here with the rest of the core team, and you already mentioned labor surveys. We also think that really tapping into more in-country literature that particularly could provide information about those members or segments of the population that are using fisheries like food fishers. There could be data there, but there might be instances where primary collection data is unavoidable for tapping into those segments of the small-scale fisheries that are most marginalized, like food fishers. It also has become apparent that using multiple methods, not only labor surveys, but income expenditure surveys was very useful. I don't know if others, demographic and health surveys, my colleagues are mentioning. So I think for the foreseeable future, it's going to continue to have to be a mixed approach, and knowing how to link different sources of information effectively, it's going to continue to be key. I don't know if that helps to start answering the question, at least.
Yeah, thanks, Javier. Mike, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, and thanks, Simon and Javier. I guess, yeah, my comment was sort of more of a general comment, not sort of, yeah, with less reference to the IHH study specifically. I suppose the challenge is now really, you know, is to make it more routine in that, you know, having in many countries, for example, where I've worked, it's often the fisheries people will not talk to the health people, or not talk to the people responsible for monitoring employment or poverty or you know, malnutrition or things like that. And so I guess it's just a comment that often or at times, yeah, integration and having these different sectors talking to each other more can be sort of one pathway forward for, you know, a more holistic understanding, and making that more routine in an ongoing way, in a sustainable way in the future. I think will be key.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Linking other institutions and getting them interested in SSF, getting it on their radar. I think this is a key theme. Ilham, we have a question from the floor. Is SSF in Indonesia sustainable, or do we not have enough data now? Could you talk to that?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think there is a simple and easy answer for that question. Is the SSF sustainable in Indonesia? But then, based on this assessment through the Illuminating Hidden Harvests, we then realized that in the future, the government and all other stakeholders should be able to design and plan specific management framework for handling these small-scale fisheries issues, counts, and problems. I recall when we had an initial meeting for this Illuminating Hidden Harvest project with a number of board of experts, and they asked me how long we had to complete the study, and I quickly said a couple of months. And it was like, wow. So what I was trying to say is that to get an ideal snapshot or figure for the Indonesian SSF, and to be able to answer whether it's really sustainable or unsustainable, we should be able to have a longer period of time for this assessment. But I think this data from the current survey of the SSF is quite giving us an early snapshot for going into more detail in the future. For example, we can choose one specific fisheries management area, and then after completing the study, and then we can move to the other FMAs, or we have more time to get accurate and convincing data. Thanks, Simon. Yeah.
Thanks, Ilham. I've got a general question. This is for the core group and any one member of the panel, which is, what was the most surprising result that you came across during the study? The thing that really you were not expecting? I'll come to Ilham last on that because he's just had the floor. But can someone from the core group, anyone there, that what was really surprised you, or you were not expecting to see that? Is that Nicole putting the hand up? Nicole Franz, my colleague from FAO, also in the core group.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Simon, and good to see you all here. Yeah, maybe one thing we wanted to share that we found was quite surprising, or where we see that we have in a way pushed the boundary of the knowledge, is in relation to the participation in small scale fisheries for subsistence. That is something which is even more invisible and less documented. So through the use of labor force surveys and household surveys, we managed to get an estimate of that participation of 53 million people. And I think that is quite an interesting finding, and that shows and emphasizes the important function of small scale fisheries also as a safety net in many ways. So that is something that we could look more into, in particular also at the country level, to understand better what that really means, also in relation to policy decisions. Now, what is really the function of small scale fisheries, and where is support needed and for what? So a better understanding who is consuming, who's producing, is something that I think we can dive better into also at the country level, thanks to the finding from the study.
How about you, Ilham? What was your most surprising result from the Indonesia study?
Yeah, I think one of our most surprising results was when we look at the data of the accumulated impact of the SSF had on the socio-economic aspect, as, for example, has just been highlighted by Nicole. Another interesting thing is that we find out that the contribution of small-scale fisheries, or SSF, towards Indonesian or national total production of fish is very rare, to find out that in both in central government statistic or in the local government statistic, to clearly define that there was a significant contribution from the SSF, because as I mentioned in my presentation, that they all excluded from the license, from taxes, and it means their catch have not been included in the data. But when we get and see the accumulated amount of the catch, for example, wow, it's 5 million tons is really a huge amount of fish. So yeah, that's how.
Yeah, that's an amazing big figure for Indonesia.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, how do we get these important values into the line of sight of government? Are you going to talk to that, Mike, or you have just a comment on top?
No, I just had an additional most surprising finding.
Please, let's have that.
Sure. I mean, for me, it was, it might not be that surprising, but it was just quite simply the scale of some of the biggest numbers. So I think the figure of, it was 492 million people depend on small scale fisheries in some way. And converts to about 7% of the global population. And, if you just think about it on that scale, just in the global popular imagination, the idea of the peasant or the small farmer is so well established, but the small fisher, I think, less so. But then when you think about it in terms of it's contributing to 7% of the global population who depend on it in some way, it really, puts it in perspective. So that was my reaction.
Yeah, that's a nice idea to maybe line that up with some of the other things like small livestock or pastoralism, to see how that nearly half a billion people, how that lines up. I see Dave Mills, another of our core team members, has shuffled into the screen next to Ma. It looks like you're about to answer a question there, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Just from a nutrition perspective, the timing was excellent. The sort of field of modeling nutrients is moving forwards really quickly, and we worked with a group from the University of Lancaster to be able to really bring a new layer of looking at nutrition contributions from small-scale fisheries. And there are a few surprises which sort of flipped out there. I mean, increasingly, we've had this emphasis on small pelagics, both inland and marine. The sort of gaze has really turned to them in the nutrition and fish space. And really, you know, despite the fact that we knew these were important, the study has really shown that they really do stand out from a nutrition perspective. And even now, with the type of modelling we're using, we're not showing the full story there because we're not accounting for small fish where heads are eaten and so on as well. So, you know, just to really reinforcing that incredible nutrition contribution from small pelagic species. And within that, there's a few other surprises that came out. One was the selenium supply from fish. And we're still sort of untangling that story, but selenium supplies from crops, it appears, are quite vulnerable to climate change. And selenium deficiencies are quite common. Selenium is used as a catalyst in a number of important body functions. And so fish are a really incredible supply of selenium. But yeah, more scratching and sort of investigation to be done in that area. So yeah, lots of fertile ground uncovered in terms of nutrition contributions from small-scale fisheries.
Thanks, Dave. And of course, selenium's really important in detoxifying mercury as well. So that's another important co-benefit. Ma, since you're there in front of the screen, perhaps you can answer this question. The data, this is an enormous data set, huge data set. Is it going to become available for people to use, to research? What's the sort of idea and thinking about where that will go next? Is that going to become something that people can access and research?
Yeah, that is something that we're still working on, and making thinking about what's the best way to approach that availability of what we found. So you want to chime in? Yeah, I mean, there's already a lot of what we do have is already available, and I think part of our work in the coming months is to try to make that more publicly known, that a lot of this is already publicly available information, but the rest of it, we're still working on what that looked like. Yeah,
I think Ma's been very modest. The amount of time, the years that she's spent cleaning this data set up to make it even half presentable with her team has been quite phenomenal. Okay, just one point really. I checked this with the core team. We are looking about the launch of the Hidden Harvest data later in the year. That's going to be probably now we're thinking it's going to be sort of definitely in the latter half, probably end of the third quarter. So keep your eyes open for that when we launch that. Any questions again from the floor? I just want to give the floor a chance because it seems like we may be talking too much, but anyone got a question from the floor you want to put in? Anything that's come up in this chat that you'd like to pick up on? Be brave. Any question's a good question. It will be welcomed. Okay, nothing yet. So I'm just looking at time here. Javier, you're back. It means that you want to say something. Let's get something from you.
Yeah, no, I want to go back to some of the findings or unexpected findings from the study. One of them for me was the level in which co-management has become mainstream in the last 30 years. As Michael mentioned, we found that 40% of the catch has some kind of management rights. For Asia, that percentage is lower. At least these are formally established management rights, what we find in legislation. So it doesn't include what is informally exercised, which might be much more. But at least for Asia, it's below the global average that we found. Again, we found that for Asia, 29% of the catch had formally established co-management rights. So that's also one finding that we want to highlight and mention.
Okay, right. Thanks, and that's actually quite interesting sort of point to finish on, because I think Mike also picked up on this point about that even though maybe we have 40% of that, the level of true participation may be much lower in the groups, and that this is obviously an area there's still a lot of work to be done. I think certainly our experience in Asia has been that governments were quick to acknowledge or to claim that co-management was now a policy, but there hadn't been a lot of real action to make it work, or it was more or less just a kind of acknowledgement of their inability to manage at high levels of detail. So they assumed or called that co-management, but there wasn't really a functional system in place, and that there's still a lot of work to be done on that in the region. I have been asked by the supervisor or the organizers to try and pull together some sort of key points and some key takeaways for the session. And a few of those have come up, and maybe I'll just sort of do a wrap up. We can finish this session a bit early. Hang on, something's come up on my WhatsApp. I can barely read it. Here we go. Thank you to my team in Rome. Look at that, they're so organized. So some takeaways for this that we're going to send off to the organizers are that there's a need for multidisciplinary data to better understand the multiple contributions of small-scale fisheries to sustainable development, and the Illuminating Hidden Harvest study is a contribution towards this. Secondly, that there are unconventional sources of data and information that can be used to learn more about small-scale fisheries and need to be tapped into more from the SSF perspective. And the importance of small-scale fisheries for nutrition in relation to subsistence activities could be documented better through the IHH study. And I think I would add in this final point that we had just came up, which is that that there remains a gap between calling it co-management and actually having it as co-management, and that we need to close that gap between the expectations or the ability to really have effective management by resource users and getting them engaged, and the state being arranged and organized in a way that actually supports and contributes to that being effective. And that's something that's definitely grounds to work on, particularly for our region. Javier, you have something else?
I was just going to add that, from the perceptions of the national country experts, the level of implementation of co-management in Asia is around 17% of the catch, while formally, almost 30% has management rights. So it's just speaking to your point of how much implementation lags behind what is actually formally established in legislation.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks for those figures. Okay. Right. I think that's it's been a fun session, and thanks very much to all of the panelists and presenters. Thanks to the team in Italy for joining us and for chipping in. I hope that you've had a few takeaways from that in our audience. And if you have questions, please do follow up with us. Can we put a contact in the chat box? Is that no? I can't find my chat box. Can someone put a link to a follow-up email in the chat box? If you have questions or you want to know more, please do get in touch with us. There we go, Mar. Thank you very much. IHH/small/scale/fisheries@fao.org. And we'll get back to you with answers, and share that with colleagues. If people are inquiring or want to know more, please give them that email. We'll make that available. So with that, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much to the team, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
นะคะพี่ไซมอน
Thank you ขอบคุณมากคุณจริยา Thank you
อะไรเลยนั่งฟัง
ครับ
บ๊ายบายค่ะ
ครับครับบ๊ายบายครับเราจะออกแล้ว
เดี๋ยวรอปิดห้องค่ะ
ครับครับโอเคครับ